News alert. News alert. Say things just to read them, right? And then figure out if they mean anything. Men not capable of real individual thinking often write famous books regarding the theory thereof. Living real close, even right next door to yourself, strikes many people as an acceptable excuse. One man thought up games for his mind to play, then almost immediately thought up some for his emotions to play as well. And guess which of the two wouldn't play right? Those not oriented to think. The hell word is that? Those not prepared to think often like to believe that men weren't intended to. Inside the pocket of an individual man, everything costs the same. There was another part to that news item that I think got lost because I saw that earlier this evening. It said that it started off as a definition was cost, C-O-S-T-S, and the definition was energy in flux. And this was obviously a corollary to it. It said inside the pocket of an individual man, everything costs the same. After being unexpectedly confronted with some true independent thinking, one man got real upset and called his mama. There was a part to that one, I think, that said that genes will comfort the weak. You have your choice. You can either define your mind or it will define you. Monopolies can afford to be charitable, magnanimous. And a guy thought, so that's why life's so nice to me. The searching for relief is no proof positive that relief is required. Since change is an illusion, only illusionary people change. And the last item, it is not correct to say, this seems to be somebody's idea related to one of the news items from last time, if my memory serves. It is not correct to say that men are born with no on-board instructions regarding how to intellectually be a man. There are some instructions, and the instructions he comes with tells him, go out and get some instructions. Yeah, and there was one more. All right, I'll read it. There's another definition. Meditation. Pastry cook's attempt at warfare. Well, why don't we pick up this last one, or the next to the last one, because, if you recall, last time all of you guys were discussing how curious it was that men readily, all sane men, the saner the better, the saner it is truer, are prepared, anxious to accept instructions, attacks, reproofs of how it is to be a man. It doesn't seem to be that direct and that plain. It gets all garbled in mystical aspects and supernatural teachings and this and that. But all of it amounts to the same thing. Whether they're waving a Bible, whether they're waving a sense of community morality, whether it is a psychological profile from some guy's view of what man is and what he should be, it all amounts to this. As they are saying, and people are accepting, it's a dance going on because they do not drag you in and force you to sit there. You go out and look for it. It is other humans, although they always want to point off, I know. But it's still that you are seeking instructions on how to be a man. And last time, the reason I bring it up is so many of you even got me curious. All of you kept talking about it. That is that not curious? That it seems as though people are not born with any on-board instructions. That if you were a raccoon, and a sane raccoon, may we say, you do not see raccoons sitting around engaged in teenage ring-tailed angst and uncertainty. Well, no. Notice, Rodin or no one ever did, one of a hippo going, of some other animal trying to contemplate what should I do next. All right. It would be easy enough to say that all other creatures, all of, what is it humans like to say? The lesser creatures, isn't it? Well, you know as well as I do, there are plenty of humans on this planet that look at dogs and wolves and cats and hippos and feel superior. Oh, I understand. But at any rate, they would all admit, everyone says that, well, all animals are already born programmed, that they don't have to be taught what to do. Which goes off into another direction also, by the way, is one of those beautiful arrangements that is one of the proofs that ordinary men have, that life makes them have, to show that men do have freedom of will, because they insist that that's one of the proofs that men are singular and that men are not tied absolutely to genetics. You follow? The proof is, and they always rank, well, the more clever they are in a ordinary sense, the more they're inclined to bring up the proof. And their proof is that there are things that men must be taught, which shows that they are not absolute pre-programmed robots. That is, that men must be taught to talk. They always like that one. That men must be taught morality. And they don't see where they're going, but at any rate. And they would say, well, that is one proof positive that man is distinguishable from the lower beast. Because sure, a dog is born, and he doesn't have to be taught. A dog knows everything it takes to be a dog. That's why he's a dog. That's why he's a lower creature. But men are open. Men are malleable. Men are not absolutely programmed. So back to what you guys were pointing out last time, discussing the fact that from one view it seems a little curious, even though that is the common wisdom of the collective right there, that still would seem a little curious from one view of a creature, by their account, so superior on this planet, absolutely singular, unique in the sense that your forefathers and God intended the word to be before it got misused by advertising. That creature's that unique that something is curious from a way that they don't look at it. If he's that unique, why is he in such dire straits? Why is he alone in need of instruction? Which could take you to the point that even from the view that we were bringing up and from an ordinary view, that there is something absolutely standalone-ish regarding man and his apparent pre-programmed destiny and any partial or complete lack thereof. That somewhere in there, that there still seems to be the question of why would man need instructions? What kind of instruction does he need? Perhaps he doesn't need any. And so this was sort of a take-up. I think whoever wrote this, where this news item came from, must have been listening to you people talk last time. Because it points out that it's not correct to go ahead and conclude that men are born with no onboard instructions. In other words, they're not born with no concept of how to be a man, in case you ever want to take it that far. I might also point out, if you don't get the gist of it, I'll have to put in the emotions. I'm just telling you, there is no doubt this is partially a sardonic news item. It is not straightforward. Trust me, there's a bit of intellectual, impartial sarcasm intended in this. But it being that it says it's not correct to say that men are born with no onboard instructions. They are. There's one that's without any doubt. But it's one that men do not translate into being intrinsic programming. That the instructions that everyone's born with are very simple. The instructions are, go out and look for some damn instructions. This is better than putting a cat's head in your mouth. Just for fun. This, in fact, is better than putting your head in your mouth. Because it will keep, do you understand, if this is a true news item, which I didn't tell you this, but over here on the side there's a little mark that they do. that says whether an item's true or not, and it's marked that this is a true item. In other words, this is not some kind of human interest item or sports item or this is marked. It's got this little, I don't know what to call it, but it's a little symbol here. You can see it. Sure, you saw it. There it was. That says, it designates this as a true item. So, consider the absolute unending beauty. It requires no upkeep. The upkeep required is specious. It is a reshining of your shoes over and over. It is an Earl Scheib repainting of the same old car. That's only upkeep, because you don't have to do anything new as long as people are programmed with this one instruction, and that's it. And the instruction is, get thee to an instruction place. That there's only one drive men have, one basic intellectual. Now we're speaking in the sense of psychic as opposed to somatic. That there is only one intellectual drive necessary, and that drive is, go find some instructions. Then after that, of course, each person seems to have already, or shortly thereafter, they seem to then have a particular direction that ordinary minds would attribute to culture and the environment. That is, right, I do need instructions. And some people seem to think, I need moral instructions, I need religious instructions, I need artistic, I need physical, I need sports instruction. But it doesn't matter what, is what I meant, that after that it's all a matter of variations on the same song, a repainting of the same old car, because as long as the one intellectual drive is placed in you, that there's one set of instruction, or one instruction, and that is, go find some instructions. It is absolutely open-ended. It can't be put on sale. They can't put it out of business. It can't go broke. The Security and Exchange Commission can't even investigate you, because no matter what you do, it eats itself up. No matter how you respond to, no matter how you would try to say, if you were trying to say such, that, well, I do sense that there is something peculiar. I have been dissatisfied. I have even been feeling guilty, upset, chagrined, as long as I can remember. And compared to some of my peers, I'm just speaking, I'll make up somebody, I'm trying to take the best, paint the best possible scenario for somebody. So that you'll see what I was trying to point at. A person could say, I have always felt uneasy, uncomfortable, felt like something was severely lacking in my life, and compared to my peers, I had it easy. My parents were not overtly religious. They certainly weren't fanatics. They did not make me feel guilty. They treated sex in a straightforward way. They treated all kinds of drugs and alcohol, and they just treated life almost, from my earliest recollection, as sort of an impartial tour guide. They did not instill in me any sense of personal guilt, and yet I felt guilty. I felt uneasy. I felt like I was doing something wrong, as long as I can remember, and they were constantly there to assure me. I can still recall it. They were not like my friends' parents. They were not like the archetypical parents I read about in psychology books now. They continually told me, you're doing fine, do what you think's right, to thine own self, be true, and etc. And yet, I've always felt like I am shortchanging myself in some way. The point being, I was trying to paint you the best possible, just using ordinary terminology and pictures, of a person's best possible position. But you understand, it is absolutely bulletproof, because that still doesn't matter. If the only instruction instilled in man intellectually is, go seek instruction, and that's it. It is like life winds everybody up one time and leaves you. Life doesn't have to come back. Not intellectual. Life doesn't have to come back and see how close you're getting. It knows how close you're getting. It doesn't have to see how far away you are. It knows. It's not like, which I might suggest is the basis of one of the unrecognized basis and points of many stories and fairy tales, is the idea of a king sending off a prince, or sending off a suitor, or sending off somebody on a quest. But the beauty of the story is always the quest is possible. It's something specific. Go out and slay a dragon. Go out and insult a Republican. if that's possible. There you go. Something. Go out and find a tree with green pears. And after that, the story is irrelevant. From one view, if you can sense it, because people read it, I would suggest you in their nervous system, I don't care whether the person finds it. What they like is the point that it's like life said, go do something, and it was specific, that it could be done. Not just all right, let's don't make it too imaginary. If the quest was a king told his bastard son, you will inherit the throne, I will place you as my rightful heir, and all you have to do is go capture a pig that weighs at least 300 pounds and bring it back. After that, it doesn't matter about the story. It can go on for 2 pages or 200. What I'm suggesting to you that people like is, that there is something that could be done. There is something that could have a finality to it. And that's not what the human psyche is born with. That's not what the human intellect is born with. The instruction is to go find instructions, period. And of course there are none. You mean that's what you was getting at? It's a story without end. Life doesn't have to stick around to check the end pages or make sure they bind it up right or that the typesetter got in the punchline. There is no punchline. Let's see if any of these others are related to that. And if they're not, we'll take them and twist them. I know some of you did, and you're waiting to hear meditation. Pastry cook's attempt at warfare. All right? If I hear challenging laughter like, well, I'd like to see you make sense out of that. Then I guess we would all have to start off with the assumption that this is fraught with, if not whipped cream and egg whites, with metaphors and symbolism. Meditation, as all of you know, people take very seriously for thousands of years, and it's now quite popular again in various guises. And it's a nice hobby, I guess. But consider, it is, let me just be outright, and then maybe you can even fill in your own version of this. Meditation is an excuse for something. They would say I'm sure that people who seriously do it, and I know they would say, well, they would want to resist the description that's an excuse for something else. They would say, well, it's a method. It's a means to achieve something else. It's not just the end, just to sit here and meditate and make my mind blank, although some people, I'm sure, would write you a check on the spot if you'd guarantee, yes, I can do that. Here's my money. What I would suggest to you, they do not look at it this way, and it's not an attack on people who meditate, because, as I point out, it's as good a hobby as taking drugs or getting drunk. It is an excuse, though. What they're trying to do is what everybody's trying to do. They're trying to think anew, which one version of that is that some of the schools, so-called schools of meditation, would say the object is to clear the mind, to still the unruly, unprofitable ripples in the quiet Zen pool that should be the quiet human mind. But that is just a simple way. They don't know where else to go with it, but that is still saying to find a new place in your mind. They put it another way, like, well, it's to revert to the Garden of Eden. It's to go back to when the mind was in better condition. They can call it anything they want to, but now you should see that it's not a simple matter of going back. That's not possible. But as long as you believe that there is a direction, like go find a dragon, go find the pot of gold, it seems to make useless effort more tolerable. So, meditation, let me go ahead and be direct. Meditation, no matter how they call it, if you were going to expand it beyond the kind of level that those people who would pursue meditation would put up with that stuff, what they're trying to do is to think independently. That's it. So, you understand that meditation then is like a sissy's way of going to war. which is why I suggest you, is a pastry cook. If you catch some kind of battlefield scene, you got all the armies out there and they're all about to fight, and you got a guy, I don't want to be offensive to any of you who may be very graceful on your feet, but oftentimes cooks seem to be of a less masculine, macho persuasion than maybe a prize fighter or a bricklayer from Alabama. And so there amidst all the soldiers and all the sailors and the people cursing, and in the kitchen, over by the cook wagon, a pastry cook decides to do his share of warfare, that is, of thinking. And so what does he do? Well, I'll just go sit down and meditate. Is that not a way to really get in there and get in the trenches and wrestle with the real problem? Assuming there is one. But they say that we're trying to get somewhere. And I'll go ahead one more time, and I'm going to give you a better, and it's an accurate description of what all meditation is about. They're trying to think independently. They're trying to think more, trying to think better. Okay. So how do they go about it? All right, I'm going to sit here and make my mind blank if it takes me 40 years. Meditation, a pastry cook's attempt at warfare. I'll teach these cheap news items to challenge us, won't it? And I cleaned up what I had in mind, by the way. The description you got was a bit more genteel than when I first saw it. Living real close, even next door to yourself, strikes many people as an acceptable excuse. God, isn't that true? Okay. Well, maybe we should slip up on it. Everyone, if you're ordinary, what would everyone like to have besides if you're a man, I guess, a blind-headed nymphomaniac whose father owns a liquor store? That's the old joke. Let's be serious. What would all ordinary people like from the head up, from the level of human consciousness up? See, the rest of that was from the level down. Was all that sex and booze and money. From the level up, what is it? They could call it all sorts of things, but what would be a fair description of what it is that every ordinary person would like to have? That is, an acceptable excuse. It'd be like the ultimate get out of jail card. If life was a game of Monopoly, it's like the one that works every time. The ultimate excuse that no matter what came up in life, whether it be moral, legal, financial, whatever came up, you had a get out of jail. I guess we could change it should be, I can get out of this card. An acceptable excuse. We're backing up on the news item that it says, living real close, even right next door to yourself, strikes many people as an acceptable excuse. I could change it and say it strikes everybody as the acceptable excuse. An acceptable excuse. In the full sense of the word, not with any great negative connotation on the word excuse, but an acceptable reason. How about that? Still an excuse, but an acceptable reason. So backing up now, what in the world could it mean that living right next door to yourself, living real close? All right, I'll tell you. People believe, to the same degree that people will say we are free-willed, that we are in need of some instructions, I am an incomplete work of art, but not completely, because there are things that I cannot seem to affect. There are certain aspects of my life over which I had in which I had no hand. I mean, if you got the time, I'll be glad to tell you. A lot of it's my mother and father. Some of it I'm still suppressing. I'm working on it, etc. I'm meditating on it. But they're saying part of the problem of me being me is simply this: I am too close to being me. But on that, when they play that game, they have gone to the other side of a news item that didn't make it in here tonight that some of you seem to, that says why it gets hot and why it gets cold. And the reason was that life has to walk to work. Sometimes the human mind will say, when it needs the proper explanation, I'm sorry, excuse. No, I meant explanation. It will say, especially to someone else, when it's walking to work, will say, I've asked you not to do that. And that person says, and they come up with some excuse. I forgot. Or I'd been drinking the other night. Well, I hadn't been feeling good. Well, now you didn't say not to exactly do that. And you're on this foot, and your view is you're not close enough to yourself to somebody else. That is, humans can change. You got some freedom of will. Don't tell me I told you not to come home drunk. I told you not to go out and spend money on another dress. That's simple. Anybody can understand that. Don't tell me I forgot. We've been through this since we've been married 50 times. Don't tell me you forgot. So you're holding them responsible. That's like freedom of will. That is that we are victims, we are end results of our environment. That has to be. That fish, if there is some freedom between a fish and the water, a fish can swim this way, can swim that way, or a fish, when it's been told to, can resist going out and spending $40 for another damn dress. So you're saying that a fish is not absolutely locked in and bound by the movements of the water, that there is some freedom of will. But as life walks to work, remembering why it gets hot and then it gets cold. And then it gets hot and then it gets cold. Then it comes time suddenly, certainly not on the same playing field, but suddenly, in an absolutely unprovoked manner, somebody turns on you. Well, somebody real dumb. Your boss. This must be the 50th time I've told you we start here at 9 o'clock. Should I try one more time? That is a big old 9. You draw it two ways. It's 9. It's N-I-N-E. 9 o'clock. Not 8:15, not 9:15, not 4:45. It's 9 o'clock. Now, as life walks to work, as you're having to walk to work through your own brain, we now have a different situation. You were not late today simply because of some personal caprice. You got your own story. Do I have to make them up? It was a wreck. A whole trailer load full of turnips turned over. There was a 7-car pileup. My wife was sick this morning. And it's not all of those being funny and not valid. But what you're saying is the acceptable reason for me is that I am too close to me. It is a fish saying, hey, I would like to do as you ask. I really would. But look at the current. What the hell do you want from me? If you live too close to yourself, it is every excuse in the world. Acceptable is actually an understatement, except it covers it. That is everyone's excuse eventually. That is everyone's raison for being themselves. That is everyone's carte blanche ticket. That yes, I'm me under the worst and the best of conditions, but especially the worst. But it's on the basis that I live, I'm trying, but I'm telling you, I still live too close to me. Which comes out, if this seems too vague, as people saying, well, certainly I probably have my own personal, if not psychotic problems, maybe even not neurotic, but I have certain eccentricities in my behavior, certain perhaps nervous system peccadillos. But I'll tell you why. I mean, it's not because I want to be weird. It's not. I don't come to work late every day just to make you mad. And you're talking to your boss. I'm back to this scene. And I know that you're so busy, since the guy's fuming now and he's reaching for a pink slip. You say, I know that you don't hear my great story about my life, but I am not only tardy here at work. I've been doing this for years. I've done it on dates. I do it, when it's time for my 2,000-mile oil change. I'll always wait like 2,500 miles. But there's a reason. I don't want to bore you, but in my childhood, the way my parents raised me, and I'm working on it. I read books, and I go see I can't afford a psychiatrist, but there's a bartender I know that's a real nice guy. But here's what you get to. You're saying that I do have some problem. It's not my personal problem because I did not instigate it. It's a holdover from my past. Here we come. And I am too close to the bruise. I am too close to the trauma. Back to the news item. Ordinary people believe that living close to yourself, real close to yourself, is the acceptable explanation, if not excuse, for everything. It is a more residential, it is closer to a physical, typological description of how men operate, as opposed to just putting it crudely and saying, well, everybody's got an excuse. Everybody can whine their way out of it. There is a literal basis for it, a physical basis. And people are using psychological, mostly today, stories that I am still too close to the kinds of traumas that have made me subconsciously resist strict time schedules that makes me late and etc. I won't bore you with the details, but I'm working on it. I am just still too close to that kind of trauma from childhood. How old are you, sir? Well, 53. But the man's working on it. He's what? He's still looking for additional instructions. Yes, I've been tardy. I've been working on this, though. I mean, this is nothing new, boss. I don't want you to think that I'm just suddenly that I can't tell time. I'm sure you got problems. I know you don't want to talk about them. But it is some kind of subconscious trauma that I'm working on, because I've been that way. I can remember the third grade. My mother would take me out onto the corner and push me towards school, and it was 2 blocks away, and it was like a 2-minute walk, and I would end up suddenly walking into class, and the teacher saying, it's 8:15, you're supposed to be here at 8 o'clock. Where were you? I have had that problem. What I'm trying to tell you, I've had that problem all this time. And you ask again, you say, well, and how old are you? 53. That's not just funny. It's nothing funny, it's not an attack. It is that there is no problem there. There's nothing to be worked out. Which was another one of the items here, wasn't it? The news items that the searching for relief is no proof positive that relief is required. Which we can move from that into this, that everyone, that is, we can change the nomenclature verbally of everyone seeking instruction, is that people are seeking relief, which is a form of instruction. But it is literal relief. I don't mean just excuses or rationales for behavior that does not seem to fit their talk, such as being late. But it's though people are seeking relief. So a person can say, well, I do have a trouble holding down a job or relationship, but I am not absolutely oblivious to it. I am now in analysis. I spend good money, boss. Don't fire me yet. I spend a good part of my pay trying to cure this. And of course, people obviously are doing it with religion. They're doing it with booze. They're doing it with drugs. They're doing it with all sorts of things that they are seeking relief. And if you were a real crude sort, you could take that in the most self-pitying, pathetic manner, if you wanted to, that everybody's seeking some kind of solace and relief. You can do it from that to what appears to be, in more civilized, sophisticated circumstances, would appear to be less of a groveling at life's unfortunate fate, that people are actively involved with trying to help themselves, such as nowadays through analysis, through counseling, through a for the cheap people, an 11-step recovery program. I just thought, I bet some of us, we know some of the real rednecks out in the country, or not just rednecks, but once they hear that you could be helped through a self-help program, a 12-step, I know lots of them that go, all right, what if I go for 11? Even at what would seem to be more sophisticated levels, it is not only acceptable, it is laudable nowadays to be seeking relief. They can call it help, but it's relief, which is nothing wrong with it. But just the seeking of relief is no proof that relief is needed. That's just you and I talking, because at the ordinary level, it's certainly proof. Because all ordinary people are seeking relief, and so if what I just said was true at the ordinary level, that would say that all ordinary people are nuts, and they're not. Or if they are, don't leave the building tonight, because we're all done for. Yeah. Forget ecology bombs and all that. We're just done for. We're dead and don't know it. So they're not nuts. They're not crazy. So at the ordinary basis, the seeking of relief is proof that relief is necessary, proper. I mean, it's self-evident. If they're not nuts, and everybody in the world, and they will admit it, is seeking some form of relief for something. And if they were a little wider in their thinking, or if you talk to them a second, they would get past, or you could bring them past temporarily, just the specific areas in which they think that they needed help or relief. And you could say, well, yes, everyone in life seeks sort of an expanded, less specific form of relief, which is what? Everything from religion to meditation, drugs, as inefficient as they may seem to be, booze, fame, fortune, that it's all a form of seeking relief. And so you could get people to say, yes, that's true. And so on that basis, there's nothing else to be said. You can't say after that, well, hey, that's silly. People, just because you're seeking relief doesn't mean that you need relief. At the ordinary level, when something is true, it's true. So if they're seeking relief, they need relief. But now, just between you and I, just because you're seeking relief, that's no proof positive that you need relief. Not an individual here and there. Collectively, it is true. That's what I meant when I said they are sane. They're the ones that, on which all of this rests, the collective ordinary intelligence of man. But just because you feel, if you were striving and you had some ability to think for yourself, and you were not caught up in the collective, if you were not absolutely driven by the ingrained onboard instruction that what you need is instruction, that somewhere along the line you thought, what I need to do is get away from that kind of goddamn idea. I need to find somewhere new. You know, I've been listening to this thing ever since my genes could talk. Find instruction. So on that level, if you had some ability, if you were driven in some way along those lines, what I'm saying now is consider just because you are seeking relief, actively seeking it, that's no proof that it's absolutely required in your individual case. Then, if you can swallow that, okay. So I'll just give you time to go, all right. Then we could move right along to the more point-blank version of such a news item and say, no, you don't need any relief. In fact, now if you can get past that point, the very fact for an individual thinker, for a non-combatant, the very fact that you think you seek relief in some area, it's almost the opposite from what we're talking about, is proof itself. Not just this news item, but once you see it, it's proof itself you don't need relief. If anything, what you need to do, and there's no way to really describe this, I can do it, and some of you get it every now and then, if anything, is to ignore it. But as soon as you see, well, I seek relief over here, there's proof positive, and screw that. And maybe I don't know what to do next, but I know one thing. I'm not making a list for Santa Claus. I got a list of things already, and I'm marking off things I don't want, and that's one of them. It's not that I do want relief from that. What I want is to forget the point that I thought I wanted relief from that. It is the ultimate non sequitur. whatever it is, I don't need relief from feeling somewhere at times angry about my mother. I don't need relief from that. What I need to do is get away from being tied to that kind of collective thinking that, hey, I got some kind of grudge against my mother, or that it means anything. You see, there's no way to put it. The point is sometimes you guys get it. Maybe I should let it go at that. It's the point that you want relief about something is proof itself that you should be, take the easiest, best shot again, is you or just forget about it. So you've got the ordinary version, the sane, necessary version, that by very definition, if sane people are seeking relief from something, it shows that they need relief from it. Then down another unlaid track of life is if you'd realize that I keep thinking I need relief from such and such. Once you see it, there's the answer. There's nowhere else to go. You don't need to drink. You don't need to go pay an analyst. You don't need anything. There's the proof that it's useless. And that's not even the word. Because you can't stop and say, wait a minute, my mama's not useless. I didn't mean that. Well, wait a minute, just because I feel like in some way I've hurt my mother, it's not just my imagination and useless. I may have. Well, Jesus, You've hurt ants. You've hurt hamburgers when you eat them. You hurt your fingernails when you bite them. What do you want to say? Yes, but this is serious. I got to work this out. And then all you can do is wave to people as they sail off again on that great cruise ship known as the Collective. Well, bye, because they ain't coming back. Oh, they can get back in the rail and holler, wait a minute, I'm going to try to come back. I need relief from this. I'm getting seasick. Once you get out there, if you're prepared to stay there, on board ship nowadays, you don't have to just eat. They got the recovery programs all over the ship. They got ships now that's all they do is sail out, and it's, cruises just for alcoholics, just for overeaters. Cruises, 7 days, 5 nights. I don't know how it works. For those who've mistreated their mama. If you get out there, there is no way off the ship, is what I'm saying. And ordinary people do belong out there. Ordinary people, drunk overeaters who hate their mother, they get on that ship and that's where they belong. But if you got some ability not to be there, do you understand? It's not to say, well, the people out there are wrong, and it's not to say, well, I'll go out there and think about it. What you want, if you understand, what you got to see is, I ain't getting on that damn ship. Not because there's anything wrong. It's just, I don't belong on there. All it's going to do is sail out for 7 days and 5 nights and come back. And we can all say, well, I found it somewhat enlightening. And somebody else coming off the gangplank says, well, at least stimulating, it gives you something to think about. And you both think, yeah, what I really think is, I want to find when the next cruise so I can go back out. Maybe next time I'm getting closer to understand that just because you have the desire to sail off for 7 days and 5 nights on a 12-step recovery program for whatever it is for which you seek relief, the ordinary need that, or it wouldn't be there. But once you understand what it is, it's don't get on the ship. And even that, I hate to put it that way, because then it sounds like, well, that's a mistake. That's a waste of time. Of course, it's worse. But it's not because that's wrong. It's because it's going nowhere. You know what cruise ships are. They're not going anywhere. They're going to sail out and fool around out there until you get seasick, until they check the calendar, and it's been 7 days and 5 nights, and they sail back. And they say, everybody also, we can bring in the next one. It's going nowhere. It's not supposed to go anywhere. The news item, in case you've forgotten it after all that, is the seeking, the feeling of, but it was worded not just the feel, but the actual behavior of people getting out and seeking relief through all sorts of means. The seeking of relief is no proof positive to an individual that relief is in order. I can always go back to the great one. Doctor, it hurts when I do that. Of course, but now it should really be that I don't have to do the punchline, see? Because even that messes it up. The real punchline is the doctor looks at you like, You goddamn idiot. And you go, see, which is sort of like, I know many of you are getting, it's not that there's something wrong with words, but when you, to say that you understand that you want to get out there on that cruise ship too. Everybody else is getting on one, and here's one that just for the kind of relief you seek. All right, let's even make it stronger. 8 days and 5 nights, sailing to nowhere, and it's the very thing from which you think you seek relief. And it's a mistake for me to even say, well, at least when you understand what it is, you go, well, I'm not going to sail that ship. See, even that's too much. Back to the version I was doing of the old joke. Once you see what the ship is, once you see what the desire for relief is, you look at the ship as it sails off. See, that was a saying of nothing. Those not prepared to think often like to believe that men weren't intended to. That is a pretty nude news item. I'm sure it would go over much better on some cruise lines if there were a few well-placed modifiers. But we don't have time for that. People not prepared to think in the sense that we're talking about. People not prepared to make whatever effort it would be to get outside the chuck wagon and to drop all that damn fancy souffle French cooking and pick up arms. Be real men and real women. Get out of the kitchen. Real thinkers. People not prepared to do that like to believe. It says often believe, but I was saying either put in some new modifiers or take out some old ones according to how fast you want to go here at the end. They like to believe that men weren't intended to. At least that'd be too strange, and you think that we're spending too much time touting the benefits of the princess line. Let's go to the God line. What is our religion? What is one of the basic threads, oftentimes hidden quite well, unless you ask them directly under the right conditions? It's certain kinds of thinking. Too much thinking can get in the way of faith. Which, if you can extract any ordinary kind of on-board, shipboard hostility, is another way of saying too much thinking can get in the way of ignorance. But it sounds much better to call it faith. We've been through some of this, but it's just another way of looking at it. Plus there is another, I suggest, news item hidden therein to try and ask those in charge of religious instructions, to ask them certain questions. Or for those of you who are good, any question other than how much money should I give and what time does it start? Almost any other question than that, like what's the purpose of life? What's the answer? They can change it around, but the answer is you think too much. See, they're into modifiers now. I went ahead and had to do it for them. Too much. This news item was just kind of stripped down. If thinking seems to be disruptive, if too much of a kind of point-blank thinking seems to be too disturbing and uncomfortable to you, you don't have to look for other people. What does your own nervous system, through the great graces of collective thought, what does it say? It tells you, in essence, hey, forget about it. You're driving yourself crazy. Or you even try to revert back to one of these news items that the people who do not really know how to think often. Surprising how often turns up in these. That's got to be the world's greatest, in these news items, greatest example of sarcasm. Quite subtle. But those kind of people revert back to the fact that people who do not know how to think oftentimes write famous books regarding the theory thereof. So you go to consult those people, and what do they have to tell you? If they get outside religion, then they want to start discussing the fact or try to get you to consider the fact, perhaps you're not phrasing the question correctly. Yeah. Perhaps you do not come to a proper response because your premise is faulty. Which they almost got you. If you're an ordinary person, of course, getting an ordinary person ain't much of a gotcha, but you say, well, I've been through religion, I find no answers there. And the philosopher says, good, you're making progress. So I decided to come to you, and I want to get past this idea of faith and just believing something. I want to know something. Good. You did pay my secretary when you came in. Okay. It wasn't a check. Okay. Well, go ahead. Well, what I want to know is what's the meaning of life? I don't want some damn opinion. I do not want something about a religious belief or to wait until I die. I want to know. And I gave her a check. It wasn't post-dated. No. All right. I want to know. And the non-religious person, now a real thinker, goes, son, that is a good question. And no offense, but I must tell you, you are not the first to ask. Okay, but what's the answer? All right, you notice, how many years have you worked on this problem yourself? 30 now. Okay. Listen to me, son. She didn't give you that cut rate. No, I paid full price. Okay, now listen to me. Has it never struck you, as intelligent as you are, and I can tell you're an intelligent boy. I can tell that from looking at you. As soon as I saw you pull out that checkbook, I thought, there is my kind of boy. So I can tell how intelligent and insightful and perceptive you are. So let me ask you this. You have been asking yourself this question for these 30 years. Does it now not strike you that perhaps the problem is not that you do not or cannot come up with an answer? Perhaps it is this. The presentation of the question you have proposed to yourself itself is faulty. And of course, the kind of people that go along with all this kind of thing, he's going to have that same kind of look that we might say a cow has when he first realized that the train's pulling into Chicago. Our young 30-year-old philosopher, heifer, is inclined after that with a certain kind of hocus pocus, and the philosopher nod like that's all for today, to kind of stagger out the door on the verge of hoping perhaps that it's not a headache I have, but it's impending enlightenment. Well, I assume all of you know I did not make that up. In the Western world, according to all history, we had the Greeks using that on each other 2,500 years and more ago. But, well, perhaps the question, perhaps the premise is at fault to begin with, is why we cannot move from a good question, or an apparently good question, an apparently valid premise, into what surely will be a forthcoming answer to people of our intellect. But why does it not? And then they would turn on each other, especially after a few goblets of the bubbly, and go, well, perhaps we're approaching this from the wrong direction. And they all went, more wine over here, please. It's a nice variation. It seems more intelligent than a priest. You ask them the question, they go, well, God only knows. More wine. Back to the news item. And you don't have to look out at priests. You don't have to look out at philosophers or anyone else. All you got to do is look at your own nervous system at the collective level. Every time you think you can't think, every time it seems as though, and you certainly don't use necessarily these kind of words and verbal structures, but it's like you are at some sort of impasse. People have cheated you again, not just financially. People have cheated you emotionally. Things happen in life that you look at and you get mad, and then you think, I shouldn't get mad. Or you look at things and you think, well, I should be able to understand this. What the hell's going on? And in essence, your mind does play this kind of combination philosopher and priest, back to the news item, that men not prepared to think in that kind of sense, men not prepared to be able to jump overboard. And you can't fake this. As you know by now, we'd have more fakers here. It's just some people are sort of prepared, wired up to do it. Or as that guy last week said, every time he asked himself why he put up all this stuff, he only came up with one answer. His life made me do it. which is the same answer everybody else has. You ask everybody else, they're drunks, they're ordinary. Why are you doing it? Life made me do it. So there's a great difference between them and you. Why do you do this? Same answer. Life made me do it. Those not prepared, those not wired up to think, to make the kind of struggle to think in that way, your own nervous system, in its own sweet, and I'm sure quite subtle, poetic, personal manner, tells you man wasn't intended to. That was point blank and pretty unmodified, because it would say, or you would say to yourself that, well, I can't understand this, or perhaps I don't have enough information yet, or perhaps I'm approaching it incorrectly. But it's still the same thing. Your brain is saying, hey, chill out, ease up, you're not up to the task. Wait a while. Ask your brain, how old am I now? And see if your brain doesn't tell you the truth, whatever it is, 30, 40. Wait a while there. Well, sure. Well, the cruise is only 7 days out and 5 nights. You'll be back in port. You'll know it all soon. And ask yourself, your brain again, how old did you say I was? Making good time. You can be 50 years old and it's 7 days out, 5 nights, 7 days, 5 nights back in. And then you feel a lot better. And all you got to do is hold on for another 40 or 50 years, and hell, you'll be dead. It's always nice to leave on a cheerful note.